Hello everyone, I'm Caroline Lee here at the Open Source Summit in downtown Austin. We are taking a quick break from the talks here at the summit, and I'm here with Shripad.
Hi everyone, my name is Shripad. I'm a senior technical staff member and a master inventor at IBM Research. And it's a beautiful day to be here.
We've been listening to a lot of interesting talks, and I wanted to take a break to talk about one of the hot topics of conversation, supply chain. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, supply chain security is becoming very important these days, right? So there are various aspects to it. One aspect is there are increasing number of cybersecurity incidents that are happening all over the world, which is concerning. So all the organizations, they are very conscious about their own security. At the same time, it is not just a security, but it is becoming a compliance problem because a lot of federal agencies and the standards that are evolving, they require you to comply to certain security practices, right? And yeah, that's why it is becoming so important these days. And to give you an example, if you probably heard in January there was an incident where one maintainer of the open source library, Colors, right, and which is a widely used library, it has like more than 1 million downloads per month. And that maintainer went rogue and he wanted to prove some point and he injected some malicious code into it. And as a result, see, everyone was affected. All the major Fortune 500 companies, they were affected. And that is the scale at which we are talking about, right? If some developer makes some code changes or some malicious changes, the scale of impact is huge. And that's why software supply chain is becoming so important these days.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was there when the Colors vulnerability happened, and it affected a lot of teams very quickly. So should we stop using open source completely?
That's a good point, right? I mean, open source has been so embedded into a software stack that it's hard to get away from this, right? And open source doesn't mean it's bad, right? I mean, if I was reading some survey which tells us that 80 to 90% of our software stack is made up of open source. We think about Linux, right? It is open source. We have Kubernetes. All the applications that we build, they are all open source components. So yeah, we should not stop using open source, but we need a secure way when we ingest or when we use open source, we need to follow secure practices.
Yeah, definitely. I know IBM internally, we have a lot of security practices that we follow. And of course, we have to follow a defense in-depth approach and follow traditional security measures such as securing code design while we're architecting it, incorporating threat modeling. While we're developing code, it's important to protect against, to perform input validation, to perform secure password management solutions and other aspects like that. But I know one topic of conversation that has been discussed plenty during this summit is SBOM and how that can also incorporate into supply chain security. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so SBOM, so supply chain security spectrum is very wide, right? I mean, as we just talked about it. When we start using open source software. So the first step in securing our supply chain is identifying what software you are using. And SBOM is framework through which we can document and list these dependencies. Whenever you ingest any open source dependency, we list it in that SBOM. So that is just the first step, right? And then, as you mentioned, that you run vulnerability scanning, you run a lot of scanning on top of these dependencies, right? That's one aspect, like how we use SBOM and how we make sure that all the dependencies that are listed in SBOM, those are secure.
And I know that there's a project that we both have been working on that incorporates SBOMs and helps gain new insight into the list of components generated from that. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that is a project we are going to talk about at the conference, and it's called Project Gauge. And the idea essentially is before we start using any software, can we make an informed decision whether I need to use this particular software, right? When I'm updating my software dependencies, can I make an informed decision about it? Because a lot of time what we are following the practices is I start using some software, some package. Over time I discover there are some vulnerabilities. I go ahead and update that dependency, I fix it. right? But this is a kind of reactive mode, right? So we are using it, it has vulnerability, we fix it. The idea essentially, can we be more proactive, right? In the sense that before I start using that particular package, can I make how I can evaluate the risk that this particular package might not be safe, right? And that's essentially the motivation behind this project that we are going to present. And in this, the idea essentially is to, whenever we identify that we are using any open source package or open source dependency, we look into various aspects of it, like why a particular, how the developer practices are being followed, right? Are the code being reviewed by the peer? What kind of changes are going into that particular software? And we are basically creating some model out of it, right? We are just trying to infer whether there can be some malicious intent or malicious code going into that particular release before I start using it.
Hey, can we see a demo of this project?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So let's say I have this particular package that I'm using. It's a Flask package, and it's one of the most popular Python package that is being used, right? And I'm using particular version of this particular package, right? So let's say 2.1.1. And now I want to know whether this particular package is safe, the version is safe, and how securely I can update to the newer version. So these are the parameters that I'm setting, and when I run it, it basically gives us the output that there is a newer version that is available. It's a 28 days you are lagging. Wow. That particular version was released 28 days before. Yeah, and there are 7 contributors who are contributed to that particular release. But if you see more closely, right, it also tells you that all the changes that went into it, they were not reviewed by anyone. They were directly made to the main branch, right? And that is an indicator that, okay, the code is not being reviewed. So can you trust this particular version or this particular package, right? And also it gives you the annotations, like to give you insight what kinds of changes went into that particular release. Like, is it a bug fix, is it a feature request, or is it just some documentation that they have changed? So based on this information, now we can build a policy, we can make some informed decisions whether I want to do upgrade or not. Because our current practice is we do blind upgrade, right? When we upgrade, we have no visibility what we are upgrading to. The idea essentially is to bring that visibility, and so we can make those decisions more carefully.
Yeah, it's really nice to see it all summarized all in one place. So does this solve all the release problems in supply chain?
Yes, so as we said, supply chain is a very broad spectrum, right? And this is essentially solving one part of that whole equation. There are other aspects to ensuring our supply chain security, like how do we secure our CI/CD pipeline, how do we secure our build processes, how do we maintain the provenance and attestations of all the actions that have happened during this. So all these things need to come together, right? So Gauge essentially is one important aspect of it, but there are other components or other features that need to come together so we can be more assured about our posture of our supply chain security.
That's wonderful. Thank you for checking in with us. We have a lot of talks to get to later today. If you want to learn more, head over to IBM Developer where we'll have a full talk of this Gauge project, and we'll have more information about supply chain there on the website. So thank you.